Yeah, I didn't want to talk too much about my work or what's here, but I wanted to talk about being an artist in general and being around for 5 decades or more of, being in the art world and seeing history roll itself out, unroll itself, let's say. That seems like an interesting subject, more interesting than talking about the painting specifically. So that would be where I would want it to go.
So where's your role now as an artist then?
Where's my role as an artist? God, I have no idea. But let's start with coming here. Just to make a quick thing, Suzanne and I have been coming. This is our 45th year here, and it started out with this German community. I was friends with Rudolf Zwerner, and he found the place in the woods. When we came, my first wife and I came to visit him and swim in Slough Pond, and then we saw this wonderful house that we've had for 45 years, and rented it immediately. And it's a long story of it, dealing with the realtor, dealing with the present owner's mother, and now with the other. We've seen him 5 times in 45 years. So we opened the place, closed the place, and Catherine Chainberg here's our neighbor, and but how it started, in a way, I didn't have any particular reason to go beyond the group of European friends, because that's how we would assemble in the summer, and we were more or less a self-contained enclave. And at the end of the summer, say, well, it was good summer. We didn't eat out once. we just went from house to house and start all over again, and just was comfortable. I did a lot of what's to me important work here, but on the other side, it just was being in New York, and it was a break. And
you also knew a lot of these Germans from showing in Europe, though, at the time.
Yeah, most of my career actually is in Europe. I had big retrospectives in Switzerland and Italy and Cologne and here and there. So I guess to put it just Europe treated me better, and the kind of work I was doing better than I was ever treated here in America. There's this very small following here and not much of a collector base. So I just fell into that, and I was comfortable there. And I had a lot of good ideas there and support from the community there. But I figured out pretty quickly that I didn't want to emigrate, although at a young age I was offered a position at the Hochschule für Künste Braunschweig with tenure. I was still in my 20s, like 27.
Wow.
And I just thought, I can't do it, so I declined and came back and worked as a construction worker here, which was really important for my work, and in terms of, I guess the best way to say it is the metaphoric potential of material and procedures and the logic of building gave a good anchor for me to move beyond abstract expressionism. And so when I went to explain somebody about very quickly my academic background, I studied art history and lit, and so I was eternally grateful for having done that. Never paid too much attention to being an artist. I intended to go to graduate school in art history. The sculptor George Siegel is instrumental in getting me to go to Rutgers, and I was kind of edgy because I didn't have that much work, and just it's not worth it to go down that road. But I went there a little bit humbled and all but welcomed into a community where there are more heavyweights than there were students. There were 5 students in my group, and it was like Liechtenstein, Capro was around, Siegel was around. Lucas Samaras just was added there. So a lot was going on, and you just did your work. Just said, what I always would tell students later, they say, what do you want us to do? They say, whatever you want to do, just do it. So that's how it was when I went to graduate school, so that's slightly unnerving. But I had my own historical base background, and it was the modernist paradigm where through the 20th century, the overriding message was push the envelope. And abstract expression has been around for so long, a little bit worn out, and the sensitivity and subjectivity I found boring. A lot of people found boring.
So let's stop here, because you were working construction, and you started making sculpture out of a lot of the materials that you were employing in construction.
Right.
And there was also, because you were this artist, this creative person, there was some sort of dichotomy going on within you. You were making work, you were in construction, and this sort of duality started to form. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I really wanted to base what I was doing in some kind of reason and rationally conceived procedure. But I had a lot of personal baggage that wanted to be voiced anyway, although I didn't really know for a long time what it was. So I was making what I thought were rational decisions, and at the same time my content was slipped in slowly over the time. And I had this occasion. I was in Germany, and I think I had I was about 27 or so, a museum show in Aachen, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the director was like too lazy to write the catalog, and I don't know what he would have written anyway, but he said, let's have a conversation. So I was flattered, and I went for the conversation. We're drinking, and he said, God, we got to get started, otherwise I'll be too drunk to turn on the recorder. So I started talking about my pieces, and I always had a pretty rational, logical explanation for what I was doing. And suddenly, in a flash, I just started weeping. And I said, Jesus, these are nothing. It's like a story I was telling. These are self-portraits of me in this dialectical way, putting my childhood and the politics, and I had tuberculosis when I was a kid, all this content that I didn't know how to face. I was stacking it up against geometry and the rational, and it was really an epiphany to realize that these pieces were really personal. And I just said, oh, this poor bastard, myself.
One of the things you said in anticipation of this talk to me, you said, I don't want to talk about how things are made, but I want to talk about what they mean. Now, with abstraction, it's almost impossible to intuit what they mean without the artist sitting there, or some scholar sort of telling us what they mean. And if I sort of look around this show and your general body of work, I always find the theme of dominance. There's these competing forces. They're trying to contain themselves or bust out. And knowing you now for as long as I do, I still feel that's a self-portrait of you. There's these things that you're trying to contain or we're trying to bust out. So from the twist piece to these block paintings to the newer work, it feels like everything you're working to either contain them or allow them their freedom. Does that resonate with you around the work? And also the slideshow, there's an iPad going around that has a bunch of historical work from the 60s and beyond. And I think a lot of that captures that feeling too, with the dichotomy of materials. You're using screw piece plywood, but you're shoving, branches in things, and you're constricting them or they're exploding out. And that sort of feels like the central theme ongoing in all of your 50 years of work.
Yeah, I could agree to that, but it took
no pressure.
It took multiple forms, and I guess in relation to that subject, I was really keen on the idea that my work had to do with myself, my biography, as I developed as an artist, as a person. So I didn't have any sense of signature style or way to work. I was just always working personally, and in the beginning it clicked with post-minimal, with a bunch of people that were working similarly, and like Eva Hesse came up, and Keith Saunier, and there was an easygoing camaraderie at that time, and it worked for me until I got out of the metaphoric. I began to say that the metaphoric qualities of material, procedure, the logic of building, and it was sexy, not sexy. It was dominant, submissive. It was this. It was about power. It was all those things. And I worked on not always, but very often, big jobs, like a building that was 5,000 feet long. If you parked in the wrong place, you're going to be late for work if you're working on the other end of the building, stuff like that. So it was interesting, intimidating, and I was, I don't want to tout too much my background, my academic background, but it served me well, and I was a kind of a walking among the workers and identifying with them in some way.
The construction workers.
The construction workers.
Because you were going to Rutgers and doing fine art classes.
Yeah, at the end, I think one of the last jobs I had, I was working on the accelerator for the Rutgers physics department, but at the same time, I was adjunct teaching also at Rutgers, and so went back and forth. And then years later, I was going to a shrink who was graceful enough to ask me the question to straighten it out. She said, for months now, I'm trying to figure out if you were a union construction worker or an artist. I couldn't, or academic too, because I was teaching. So it was this dichotomy.
What did you answer?
I don't know, what did I answer? I didn't, it just was revelatory for me.
I mean, even that feels like your paintings, right? You're both things. You're these sort of, that twist piece, I keep on looking at that.
I needed both, I needed both. And that goes for my background also, like being sick as a kid, missing out on all this boy stuff. I felt very female identified. My mother was having nervous breakdown, postpartum depression. So I would try to help her. And I said, God, I wish I were a girl. I could help her. But she'd say, go out and play with the boys. So I had that. And then my father he was a party member, and we had a lot of harassment. So that gave me paranoia, a lifelong dose of the system.
Being surveilled.
We were talking about, I found this article about Foucault and AI and surveillance and control from lack of authorship and all. And so I always responded to that. And in the academic world, where I really just started out and went to the top of the whole system, you couldn't go any higher. And
You were the head of the Rutgers art
yeah,
department.
but that was nothing. That
Well,
was
it's something to mention in a talk about your career and work. How many years did you run Rutgers?
Well, I ran it for 8 years till I was deposed. I wasn't particularly democratic, but no. The thing with that was I had the confidence of the dean of the school, and he would say after a while when advice is needed, one contacts the sage on 24th Street. So a couple of times, even having to do with the state government, I gave him my opinion, which probably was his opinion also. So he had a certain confidence in me, but I never felt comfortable there. I always felt like, I was masquerading as the child of a commie or a construction worker or something else. There was a book years ago called Strangers in Paradise, and it was, I forget the writer, but the book, it really hit it. It's like working class people who wind up in high academic positions never feel comfortable. I always felt I was going to be exposed somehow, and
What about now?
I still have it. I can't say that I got over it. I can't say I got over any of the things that we're talking about. But
So therapy really worked.
You just accept. You just have to accept. I accept them, and that's who I am, and I'm comfortable with that. And yeah, it goes on. That's part of your own puzzle. And then to go back to my work, I really would do what I had to do for myself, and where it fell in relation to history as it developed was, for that reason, it worked much better in Europe. And there were things along the way that I could have exploited, like done more of, but I didn't want a job. I didn't want to make two of something that I already knew what I'm going to get out of doing one. So,
And you had that stuck in, you were always trying to push the envelope from what you were told at a younger age, right? How to succeed in art was to push the envelope.
yeah, I think that's fair to say. I tried some of the craziest things, and you could imagine for however my output looks, there were many, many ridiculous, crazy things that I tried to do along the way. There's failures and impossible things or false things that I didn't like the implications of. So, yeah,
So for this show, it's called Throw Nothing into the Sea, which was a sign that Gary had seen on a boat, right? You took a photograph of it, and then you sort of filed it away. He and Cindy, again, Cindy is Gary's office manager, art manager, studio manager. Studio director, thank you. But they have a file of titles that they pull out and maybe assign to new work and all of that. But you had seen that, and that was in 2002, I think. That's what the slideshow says.
To throw nothing into the sea,
Yeah.
more or less.
2002, and Susie ended up choosing that as the title for the show. And we also sort of talked that Susie and Cindy kind of made the decisions for what would be in the show, and Susie basically hung the show on her own without your input. And you were saying that's how you would prefer to work in general, that you kind of want to make the work and then...
Yeah, the only thing I really don't like is like overhung one thing to the next. It's a work also, and people who have galleries have many more chances to experience installation than I do, so I'm inclined always to trust. And then even picking work, like I have a routine in this studio now where if somebody comes to look at my work, I'll hang around for a minute, but I like to go to the bathroom or make coffee or something like that, just to get out, to leave Cindy alone with the clay. It's better for everybody. Nobody wants to get into that with an artist, and so it's, we have a really good working relationship. I totally trust her judgment and all that. So
This is Cindy we're talking about.
That changed my relation to the art world. I more or less don't do anything now.
Well, you make the
No,
work.
I just do my work. I don't do anything. It's not that. I'm not. I don't hustle. I don't try. I don't go to openings and all that. It just, I've been doing it for so long. I'm falling apart physically. I broke my back a couple of years ago. I'm just getting over that. But as these two know, we took a walk to the sluiceway yesterday, and I fell twice.
Just twice. That's fine.
So,
But actually hurting your back is what started making this body of work in here.
Yeah, I could say that. I couldn't. I wasn't taking the whole thing that seriously, and then one of our German friends, who's a surgeon, looked at the X-rays and the report. He said, "You're damn lucky you're not paralyzed, and just take it easy." So I stopped my routine of trying to pretend that nothing had happened, but I really have long-term damage from that. And after his saying, "Don't get smart, just take care of yourself," I started to make smaller pieces in the period. I say you shouldn't carry anything heavier than a half gallon of milk. And, then it opened up into an area that I wasn't particularly comfortable with, the kind of the psychological, the psychosexual, the whatever, that I wasn't so anchored in the full of my background. I just picked up to some extent on what always made me uncomfortable growing up in the 40s and 50s of, thank God, I should have been a girl. And I wasn't about being gay. It wasn't about it. I'm still totally happy with that. I got in my share of physical things. I didn't like boys' sports and all that. I don't care about baseball, football, basketball, but I liked hiking and skiing and that kind of thing. So, and, wound up.
And what you did with your paper money when you were a kid? You took a...
Oh, yeah, that's,
He saved up paper money and took an art...
Yeah, I had a paper route, like in the 50s, early 50s, all kids had a paper route if they were in the right neighborhood. And I used the money to take art classes with Mrs. Silkoch some blocks away. And I just felt
And all middle-aged women.
Well, they were all mother types.
Yeah. And then you were 11?
Yeah, 11, 12, something like that.
The only boy in a class of all women taking
they were all.
life drama.
So I felt comfortable with that, and I guess it made, I was being sick. I was just really speculative in a way that boys mostly weren't. They were out playing and fighting and doing this, and so I think that accounts for a kind of erotic dimension of my work, and that still stays with me. I'm still interested in that as a subject and the kind of the dialectic or the dualism of all gender issues, and it was perfect for working. I could do these small pieces, and when it first happened, I guess I was a little bit recovered, but I had 100 small paintings like this size, and they were, by another set of circumstances, included in the Basel Fair 2 years ago, Sidney? Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
that was one piece.
Well, they said it's okay, but the fair said it's not a bunch of pieces. Oh, we're going to sell a few works, but they said it's one work. It's like a kind of study. So I agreed to that because it made sense to be included in the Basel Fair in that way.
And so all this new work is also really the first time you're using color a lot, because primarily all the work was black and white, and you would use the color pink only, which you said was
Or
sex.
whatever. Yeah, I was so poor that I stole most of my material from job sites, and once in a while I could afford a piece of plywood. But I would buy a color. So there's this sculpture called the Mattress Dream Piece that's yellow, painted yellow. That's all I could afford, 1 quart of paint. So I made all these sculptures that were yellow until that was gone. Then I got another color. It's totally the mystery of all that is pretty simple when you pare it away. It made it simple too because I'm somewhat colorblind. I mean, I can see the big ones, but subtleties I don't see that well.
But you were saying with these pieces, you would show Cindy and say, "Is this the blue I want, or is this the?"
Yeah, I would say, "What color is it?" Because now I can afford whatever I want. I would just take 6 or 8 things and put them. Change it. Let's throw a little of that in. So I wound up with mud of different vaguely very sensitive mud. So I could make sensitive also, and that informed me now. And preceding that were the what was it, Middlesex, these stencil pieces. That's something else too about the idea of with the show that RJ did. When I think that's the best interview I've had. RJ and I talked in a gallery on First Avenue or Allen Street, and it was kind of wild, and we just clicked in a certain way, and came around to. I lost my thread. Where was I going with this?
That's okay. I have another question. Most of the work is either untitled or labeled sort of like branch piece or stair piece or screw piece. And in this new body of work, you've named a number of things Gertrude for Stein.
Yeah.
Can you? And I was actually doing, her sort of quote, a rose is a rose is a rose is a rose, which also is something I think about your work. Like these pour paintings, for instance, like you kind of let the paint do what it's going to do, and that's it. You don't really manipulate it. You put the paint on, and I'm wondering if you can talk about Gertrude Stein in relationship to your work and personally what that means to you, because you don't name a lot of things, and now you have several pieces named Gertrude.
Yeah, well, now if I saw a bunch of paintings, said this is Gertrude, that's Gertrude, that's Gertrude, but the rest of them, I don't know. I had the experience of a gallery, a 57th Street gallery, said, "Gary, tell me something about the fifth of 9 C's," or something like that, the shape of horses. I said, "Aiden, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't have a clue, so send me a picture or whatever." And some of the descriptive titles. There's certain of those. But what came up more recently really, really interested me a lot was this curator at Barbican contacted Cindy about doing a show called, I don't know what it's going to be called, but about the artists in the 60s, mostly the 60s and 70s, who called their work pieces. So it's a plank piece, bolt piece, wire piece, fiberglass piece. So they had the general category anyway. And I never thought about it. It never occurred to me. And it never occurred to me that other artists were doing the same thing. I was not the only one. If you look at that period, there are 8 or 10 artists who were calling the work pieces. So she put me right back on my heels. What was that about? And then I think it was that, when I was starting out, and even when I had my couple of years as a graduate student, I would do stuff that was so weird you couldn't really call it a sculpture. And I was aware in the 19th century of the moves like that, like Degas. What's the most famous one? The Degas bronze dancer of 13 or something with the tutu and the ribbon on. Things like that. Daumier made some pieces, and of course Picasso did the pieces with wire that Gonzalez welded for him. He didn't know how to weld. And, that kind of play, it's coming in and then in Dada and Surrealism, but that seemed a little different. And I was asking myself, did I call them pieces because it was too pretentious to call them sculptures? Something like this has to do with schools. Anything could be sculpture, but painting was painting, printmaking was drawing, but if it's some kind of amalgam of materials, it always was sculpture, and by extension, if it was far out, it were just pieces. So I started to think about that both historically and personally, and a couple of times I had experiences with with Helen Frankenthaler. She was a visiting person, and she was quite filled with herself, and she saw this sculpture that I had of a guillotine that was, so it had a plaster block, had the structure of a guillotine, and then it had a condom filled with plaster laid on it. And I pressed the block, the above block, down on it, just squished out on the sides a little bit. And she said, I don't think, something like that. I got really mad. I said, I don't care what you think. We had to do something else, and it was really clear that I wasn't fitting in with the old stuff. I respect her too, by the way, as a painter, but she and this whole generation had no sense about how the scene was moving. And another, just to go maybe off the track a little bit, George Siegel used to have these pool parties, so it could be like Rauschenberg would be there, Lichtenstein sometimes, and Capro, and Jill Johnston, this critic, Lucas Samaras. And they would sit around and say, I wonder what Twombly's going to do this year, because things were always happening. You could say when the season started, you're in for surprises. Jasper Johns would do something that nobody saw before, and so it was exciting. And then he would have these pool parties at the old chicken farm out in Jersey, and afterwards a big chicken dinner with a salad, sitting around the table talking, and after 2-3 years of this, I still wasn't that much of a talker or theoretician, but somebody said the same thing. I wonder what's going to happen this year. And to myself, I said, nothing. It's the same old shit that was going on before, over and over and over, and the art world turned into that. You could have another tweak it, and you can go in this direction. And mostly people made it on signature styles, but there weren't that many, in my opinion, there weren't that many innovations, and they were always on the periphery. So that kind of affirmed my idea about working. That had to do with you do something, you understand it, it says what you wanted it to say, and then you move on.
Because you were also working out like personal issues through the pieces. So when those personal issues were resolved, you were done with the piece?
Yeah, otherwise I would have quit working. Right. There was no reason to. Yeah, it came out to be always the personal, but with guards, with some degree of rational thinking, some respect for geometry, for mathematics, and then I could add the sex on the side, and it seemed like a nice mix. It still intrigues me.
Now the current work, the newer work, feels like lighter, it's colorful, it's less heavy. Do you feel that way in general through these 50 years of making work, that you've learned things, that you feel more resolved, that you feel calmer? I mean, the work feels brighter, more open. There's more space in the work than the older stuff. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, it's ended something, I suppose. I don't suppose, I'm just restless to do some larger works now that, that play on everything I did. I don't know. I can't tell, otherwise I would do it and not sit here and tell you about it. But this is another thing. I always would say this to students because that was a really important part of my years. Somebody say, how was it teaching? I said, yeah, it was great. I learned a lot. And I did. But with students, I was really almost out.
We have 5 more minutes.
About who's going to do something, who's not going to do something, and there's a certain economics to that, especially now that arts departments are a kind of pyramid scheme all around the country or around the world. And you had to have the number, so I would take any student who came along and said, what do you have to have? Record a pulse. And then if they did something, they did something. So you always would wind up with 3-4 students. And I would go there almost every day because if I were working on pieces like that, which is really a modest one compared with some, I needed the heat, I needed the hoists and all that, and I needed people to help me. So I'd get a young person or two, and not just men. I learned most from a woman who was she came from San Francisco. She was a vacuum welder in Silicon Valley, and then a frame builder for the Hells Angels. She had to, so she elevated our welding skills.
Oh, yeah.
So it was sort of like when I went to school. You just talk about things, and so it worked out. And
I don't know that I got an answer. Why are the pieces named Gertrude? I want to come back to that. That's my final question.
I don't know, just the Picasso portrait, I suppose. But if she would have turned around and sat with her viewing away from the viewer, you would have this big ass and
that's
cleavage,
But it does. It looks sort of like these shapes.
I wasn't thinking of these. These are like relationships, like pushy. In a way, that's how I would read this. I don't want to get into this too much, but I would always see these as elements in relation to each other. You could make psychology out of this. You could make power relations in couples out of this. And this one, it's kind of insemination or something like that. I can't really say what it is because I did it, I liked it, and I don't know, you do things that you don't understand yourself and you might never really understand, and I'm okay with that. In fact, if I understand something really, I just lose interest in it. And that's the same thing with the rhythm that I go on with, is, it's in cycles, and I use the pregnancy metaphor. You get knocked up, you gestate, and you have a sculpture, and then it's an entity by itself, and there you are with nothing to do. Since I didn't want to make a series of them, I said, okay, and in the beginning I would be, meaning in the 70s, so I'd be a little bit anxious about what am I going to do. But now if I don't do anything for 2-3 months, it's fine, I'm thinking. And somebody says, are you working? Like writers tend to do this. Are you working? If I'm doing nothing, that's when I'm working the hardest. When I know what I want to do seriously, then I hit it like a cobra. Then I do what I want, and some variations of them, and that's it. Then I'm out of the game. I'm barren, and you have to wait for the next the next inspiration, which is always the hardest because, then you have age starts to play into it. You think about, I'm 87, I'm always falling down now.
Just twice.
Always being picked up. And so it's a little bit crazy, like in a city. One of the funniest ones, I fell down, and I was picked up by 3 women who they had office jobs that were all really attractive. So they got me on my feet, and I said, no, I just lived down the street. I didn't even make it to 6th Avenue where I fell. And they said, no, we could walk. I said, no, it's okay. But what I was thinking, oh, God, it would be great to go out with these women and have a martini.
Okay.
This game is over.
One more question, actually. Have you ever editioned sculpture except for this one here? Have you ever made more than one of the same piece?
Yeah, I did. Somebody persuaded me that I should do etching. So there was a good print department at Rutgers, and I tried it, but I was too sloppy. The same thing with photography. I couldn't really do it because just didn't have the patience and whatever for it. So I made this etching. It was okay in a way.
And that was editioned.
And that was an edition, but I don't know of how many. But I gave the whole thing up. I mean, you couldn't sell a print or a painting. It didn't make sense to make 2 of something when you couldn't do anything with 1. So I did it, and then the plate wound up in the farm, just in the mud, and outside of one of the studios. It was like half submerged. It was there for 30, 40, 50 years, and I found it, and I got sentimental because it looked like some really early drawings I had done. So I gave it to somebody to clean it up and pull a proof from it, but it being in the mud and who knows what else, half of it disappeared. So I thought, this is like probably a sign of getting old. I said, well, let's see what it looks like. So we had it printed, a small edition, and it's like half of it's missing. So it's a kind of, what's it called again? I forgot.
Time Runs Its Course.
Yeah, Time Runs Its Course, which is a title I like a lot anyway for other sculptures about the sun going down and all that. So we have it, but we never did anything with it. It's still in the drawer.
But Gary, RJ asked about sculpture editions, and we have, we've taken casts of 60s and 70s sculpture editions really to make them available for market because they're rare. But this is the first sculpture ever conceived as an edition.
Right.
Yeah.
The black piece over there on the wall.
So this was funny. I have it in this kind of dimension of, it's vaguely mystical. It's vague. It's hard to get a hold of. But I made it and put it on the wall in the studio. Not particularly thinking about where to place it, but there already was a hole in the brick wall, so I put it there. It was near some painting. A woman who was working for Suzanne said, I don't know if she liked that or she said it was better than the painting. So what the hardest part with the piece was to think of a title for it that was adequate to the idea, and I couldn't really, in a systematic way, run down the implications, so I thought I never bothered. But to call it the alternative, I've been working on a title for 3 months, and I had it in sleep, and I said, I better write this down. So I jumped out of bed and jotted the title down, and thinking about it a few days later, it was a perfect title for the piece. It's like the alternative to what? To living, so yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Oh, you gotta take the microphone.
Oh, I didn't expect this. So I loved hearing you talk about your colleagues, American artists and people that you work with here, but you also mentioned that you had your most success in Europe and that you were actually in Germany. And I see some kinship with Joseph Beuys in some of your sculptures, and I'm wondering if you had a relationship with him And how was that?
Yeah, boys, I don't know. I never bought into the whole thing, although I was introduced to him by, are you German?
I'm not, no.
By Caspar Koenig, this international figure who was friends with boys. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting in the terms of this showmanship, and you could have a whole nother class about, or discussion about boys. These are what is the school? It's the professors, not that. So he had a fight with the academy, and they fired him. He said, "Okay, that's the end of it. It's the Weise Eule is the bar. This is where the school is now." Nobody went to the school. They had to hire him, and all the rest of the mythology about him is, it's interesting. I can't say it's not interesting, but the whole thing of the fat, and he was wrapped in fat and felt, and that's how he survived the plane crash and all that stuff. But no, I knew a lot of his students, and they are former students. They had enough with them too. So the Dia Foundation, and they, that's where even somebody at Dia told me that they don't know what to do with all this boys stuff. They have stacks of felt and stacks of this, and so that's what it is.
Oh, boys. Other questions? Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you keep shouting.
Okay, Gary, I'll do my best. Could you talk just a little bit more about how you experienced the way in which Europe responds to you and your work, and the way America responds or doesn't respond to your stuff?
Yeah, you always have, of course, these people are the geniuses that, that understand what you're doing, and that follow you or have faith in you and that sort of thing. But yeah, then there's some writers who really prove that they have some sense of what's going on. And I would say I got my due, or I got enough to sustain me. If I didn't have any support, I would inevitably start to think I was crazy. But
you got more support from the German writers, European writers?
Yeah, more support, but then in Europe, I think they just support art more than this country does.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's a tricky question. But let's say I had enough support and enough understanding and enough camaraderie within a broad spectrum to keep me going. And then I guess I always knew that I was going to have to pay the rent, except for like a 10-year period when we made so much money we didn't know what to do. I mean, we did, but I had a big success, like 73, 74, right around the energy crisis. So it seemed like a fortune. I got 20 grand, something like that. And I said, wow, this is fantastic. The next year I made $400. So that's what I thought. I really better think about getting some way of making a living besides doing iron work. And that's a killer kind of work. I already knew that you couldn't do this for too long. You'd be like a broken person. So I started seriously to think about the academic world as a net. And I think I on that score I was always myself, and I honestly think that I gave more to fewer students than the administration might feel. They would want more, and I just fixed on the ones who I thought were really onto them, and they knew themselves a little bit. They just had an authentic ring. I would do anything to help them. So I was, by that time I had tenure, and I was on my way, and kind of entity. unto myself. So that's what I said. I was great, and I retired. I never really can remember what year I retired, but I angled a deal where I signed off on my tenure so that the university had my faculty line back, and I kept the same salary but no benefits and none of that, and I stayed on that for 3 years, and after that I stayed on and on to as a visiting, self-indemnified visiting artist because the department had all the machinery that I needed and then some. And I finally gave it up when I would see the kids walking around saying, "Who's that old guy? I think he owns a place." So I gave it up then. I had alternatives.
You I don't need that. You were speaking about that one moment where, we were looking forward to Jasper John's exhibition and Alan Capro thing coming up the next year. There was some excitement in seeing the changes that these artists would go through. And then you kind of trailed off a little bit and it kind of just fell into like a trope thing. Is that a point in like the late 70s or mid 70s where the work you kind of identified was...
I would say the 80s. I would say the 80s.
Yeah, and then what happened? So what would exist in at the present?
Well, everybody was doing the same thing they did last year. A few new names pop onto the roster, and there would go from, like, if I can remember it, the realists, new realism.
Yeah.
And then pattern and decoration, and I don't know, I forgot it all. But it became pretty uninteresting.
Yeah.
So you had to. And, I mean, honestly, now I'm kind of out of the game. If I have to count on people to tell me what's going on, to see if for me to evaluate, to size it up for myself. But I don't, and also I don't think the game is over. I think it just. What somebody told me years ago, I was complaining, nothing happened. He said, "Don't worry about it. There have been 1,000-year periods when nothing happened." You're worried about 20? Come on. I kind of, it was an offhand thing to say, but I think there was a lot in it. So well, that's how it is.
With the cave painters, they say that went on not for thousands of years, but millions of years where the trope stayed the same, exactly.
Right.
So maybe we're in that again,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here, you want that?
Yeah, sure. So you're often written about in post-minimalism, and you mention post-minimalism. What's post-minimalism?
Yeah.
How do you
I kind of don't like, Cindy and I were talking about that before. First you have to talk about minimalism, which, I could respect it. It didn't have enough, this is a complicated question. You have to throw in Rosalind Krauss saying biography is disease. This was October magazine, this vaguely Marxist period. I don't even know if it's still running. Is it? Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah. Is it? Yes.
So I just thought that to say that there came minimalism and then post that I'm allegedly connected with, but I just see minimalism as something that happened, but there's more connection to me between what got to be called post-minimal, and there was any number of people like Bill Bollinger and on and on. What do I want to say? It didn't. A real narrative would put that. I don't know. I don't like how the sequential idea of it, of abstract expressionism, minimalism, post-minimalism. I mean, we were all making this kind of work the same time Judd was making boxes. If you look at the time, if you look at the chronology, it didn't get the attention, but that has to do with post-minimal. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. That was a good thing about it in a way.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy I'm here and to hear you talk about beginning and now. And the thing that interests me the most is I love the aspect of your working on a construction site or working as a construction person. But I noticed that there were certain words in your dialogue or your vocabulary of using humiliation and disgrace and authority. And it feels like it comes so much from your illness and your background. And it just gives somehow so much glory to your work that it doesn't have to be put into like a post-minimalism, whatever. That it really individualizes you, and it's really beautiful. And I'm so happy that I got to hear that part, because I was trying to figure out, like, I thought you just went like this, with this piece,
Nothing to it.
Yeah, right. But it was that aspect of your upbringing, and so many of artists that I know in town, they talk about their background and their families and what their parents did, and that comes into their work, and it does individualize them, and I think that that's the beauty of your work, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's
Do you want to say something?
no.
Okay.
Gary, did you ever have any interaction with Ava Hess?
Yeah, we were at parties together, but she was already kind of sick by that time. She was still around, but declining. So no, I never talked about art with her. I never talked about that shitty material that we used. God, the police are coming. That's what I was afraid of.
Now you're a real star. No, the police are here.
There's a gentleman in the back here who has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Out the window.
My question is, I'm curious about how you make decisions. And
How do you make decisions?
intuitive or more analytical? If they're more like you're just doing things like you breathe, which is a very complex act to breathe, but we don't think about it and it happens. Just decisions.
How do you make decisions? Or is it more analytical, intuitive, or is it just like breath, which is difficult also?
It can go how it goes. I wouldn't say that I'm leaning on one thing. It's certainly I don't lean on rationality. Maybe I'm more crazy, and then I tone it down, or in a dialectical way with reference to like classical geometry, classical thinking, and rationality. I think unbridled craziness doesn't make too much sense.
So it says starting and then massaging towards something? Maybe?
So you're starting and then you massage something?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
He doesn't know.
That's a good answer.
I don't know really. I can't. I don't know. I can't tag it on to a specific thing.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone? Okay, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks to Gary and to Susie and to Cindy and to Suzanne. Thanks.